To the Alphaeus twins, this was a perfect day. They really enjoyed it all the way through, and not being present during the time of quiet visitation about the temple, they escaped much of the anticlimax of the popular upheaval. They could not possibly understand the downcast behavior of the apostles when they came back to Bethany that evening. In the memory of the twins, this was always their day of being nearest heaven on earth. This day was the satisfying climax of their whole career as apostles, and the memory of the elation of this Sunday afternoon carried them on through all of the tragedy of this eventful week, right up to the hour of the crucifixion. It was the most befitting entry of the King the twins could conceive. They enjoyed every moment of the whole pageant. They fully approved of all they saw, and long cherished the memory. Of all the apostles, Judas Iscariot was the most adversely affected by this processional entry into Jerusalem. His mind was in disagreeable ferment because of the Master's rebuke the preceding day in connection with Mary's anointing at the feast in Simon's house. Judas was disgusted with the whole spectacle. To him it seemed childish, if not indeed ridiculous. As this vengeful apostle looked upon the proceedings of this Sunday afternoon, Jesus seemed to him more to resemble a clown than a king. He heartily resented the whole performance. He shared the views of the Greeks and Romans, who looked down upon anyone who would consent to ride upon an ass or the colt of an ass. By the time the triumphal procession had entered the city, Judas had about made up his mind to abandon the whole idea of such a kingdom. He was almost resolved to forsake all such farcical attempts to establish the kingdom of heaven. And then he thought of the resurrection of Lazarus and many other things, and decided to stay on with the 12, at least for another day. Besides, he carried the bag, and he would not desert with the apostolic funds in his possession. On the way back to Bethany that night, his conduct did not seem strange, since all of the apostles were equally downcast and silent. Judas was tremendously influenced by the ridicule of his Sadducean friends. No other single factor exerted such a powerful influence on him in his final determination to forsake Jesus and his fellow apostles as a certain episode which occurred just as Jesus reached the gate of the city. A prominent Sadducee, a friend of Judas's family, rushed up to him in a spirit of gleeful ridicule and, slapping him on the back, said, "Why so troubled of countenance, my good friend? Cheer up and join us all while we acclaim this Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, as he rides through the gates of Jerusalem seated on an ass." Judas had never shrunk from persecution, but he could not stand this sort of ridicule. With the long-nourished emotion of revenge, there was now blended this fatal fear of ridicule, that terrible and fearful feeling of being ashamed of his master and his fellow apostles. At heart, this ordained ambassador of the kingdom was already a deserter. It only remained for him to find some plausible excuse for an open break with the master.